Well, I can boast of, as an academic, of 4 famous students. The most famous is, of course, Bill Clinton, the President of the United States, the former President of the United States. Viktor Orban, the present Prime Minister of Hungary, was also a student of mine, but for a very, very short time, because he was also a student leader, a political leader. So when they called an election in Hungary, he stopped his studies and went back. But for many years I was in touch with him. Then, of course, the present Foreign Minister, Radek Sikorski, is a pupil of mine, was at my college for 3 years, so that was the longest relationship. And quite recently I discovered that an old student, whom I more or less forgot, called Prince Sukh Paribatra, ended up, he's now retired, as the Foreign Secretary of Thailand. So 2 foreign secretaries, 1 prime minister, and 1 president. It's not a bad record. But then, you know, I taught at Oxford for 40 years, and Oxford is an interesting place, attracts interesting people, and so on. So it's not such a huge achievement, I suppose. And it struck me extremely forcibly that what was happening to Poland was an absolutely historic event. It was the working class coming to recognize that they had been deceived, that they're no longer the leading class in the nation. You know, this was, of course, the party was called sort of the leader of the working class and building of socialism and so on. The workers had seen through this. They realized that in fact were being, in a sense, used and exploited by the people who were actually governing Poland, running Poland, and who really became essentially a new governing class with all sorts of economic, political, and other privileges. And what had been happening, what had happened on the Baltic coast was actually, to me, a symbol. I was so excited. I gave lectures, 8 lectures on the subject, had them recorded, transcribed, and produced the book. You know, a revolutionary breakthrough in the history of communism, the awakening of the working class, you see, and standing up for the rights, and a true position in society. Now, nobody was interested. I remember I was laughed at by the publishers I sent it to, said, what, a book about what happened in Poland during a few weeks? What about writing a comparative book about all the communist countries, the Soviet bloc taken together? So nothing happened. However, this was very, very important because when Solidarity occurred, when the Gdańsk strikes happened in 1980. To me, this was in a sort of continuation of what had happened. This was another revolt of the working class against the communist masters, but in a much more rational, much more organized, much more sensible way. Something which was extremely successful in the sense that they succeeded by the strikes, but also by their attitudes, their unwillingness to compromise, to accept, for example, just the some economic concessions, rise in wages or whatever, and insisted on, first of all, an independent trade union, but also a range of other sort of important political concessions. This to me was an extremely important phenomenon. I had been looking or thinking and talking occasionally in Poland with people who are in the opposition, but also people, the sort of reformers in the party, about the possibilities of the system changing, being democratized in some sense. And it struck me that here was an absolutely wonderful historical chance, you see, of creating within a system which was of course a dictatorship of one party, which was centralized and tightly controlled from above, to create a sort of an island, if you like, of independence, of autonomy, in a very limited sphere, but extremely important one, because it enjoyed the support of the working class, you see, who were, after all, I mean, the most numerous and politically the most significant part of society. You see, the regime could ignore political, intellectuals who were in opposition, or youth groups or whatever, but they could not ignore millions and millions of workers and employees of this huge state.